Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing another book in the Medieval Craftsmen series. This is Goldsmiths by John Cherry. Unfortunately, my library put a huge sticker on the cover, so I will just show you pictures from the inside throughout. And I have read many books in this Medieval Craftsmen series and enjoyed it, so I decided to get Goldsmiths, figured it would be a good book to read, and I was not disappointed. So let's talk about what you can expect if you read Goldsmiths, this book in the Medieval Craftsmen series, and things that I particularly enjoyed about this book. So the book is broken up into about 6 loose sections, and they're kind of each focusing on an aspect of the Goldsmiths' work. And the book is under 100 pages, so the topic never gets deep into anything, but I personally like that because it's a good pairing of the pictures and a little brief introduction and just enough history to feel like you're not just reading a little paragraph and moving on, but you're not reading 250, 300 academic pages of the particular craft that's being explored. So we're just going to go through the content section, and I'm going to show you some of my favorite pieces and discuss what you can expect or what broad topics were covered in this book, so you can determine if this is a book you want to purchase or read, or if you just want to hear more about Goldsmiths. So there's always an introduction, which just kind of introduces the topic, and then the author gets right into talking about the division in the goldsmith community between goldsmiths for the monasteries and goldsmiths for the secular world. So if we think about goldsmith, it's going to be tied with things like money and currency, as well as objects that are going to be used to celebrate the mass in the church, or things that are given to the church to be ornamentation. But also in the secular world, it could also be used for things like kings or people with a lot of power and authority to show off their wealth. So we have 2 streams, and the author takes the opportunity in chapters 1 and 2 to kind of explore the differences between goldsmiths in monasteries or goldsmiths associated with monasteries, so goldsmiths in the religious world, and then goldsmiths in the secular world or secular goldsmiths. So that's the division in chapter 1 and 2. Chapter 3 was actually, in my opinion, the most interesting section in this book. So it starts with this really fascinating picture which depicts gold mining, and it's one of those pictures where there's a lot going on. I probably spent a good amount of time just looking at this, and I would actually love to get a full-size print. Is that weird to get a full-size print of some medieval picture of gold mining? It's probably weird. That's fine. I would love to get a print of that and hang it up in my house, but I don't know, maybe my house guests would not appreciate it. I would appreciate it, and if it's my house, I'm doing what I want. So the material section focuses on the raw material that goldsmiths use, and I did not expect this chapter to be as interesting as it was. I guess I didn't realize or hadn't really thought a lot about it, but gold was recycled. So in the Middle Ages, at least in the early to mid or high Middle Ages, there wasn't a lot of gold actually being mined. There was some, but it wasn't being mined in high enough quantity to really make a difference. Instead, the gold that was already in existence was being recycled, so melted down and reused, and also traded in currency and in trade through the Western European world, the Eastern European world, and the Arab world. And this actually led to some imbalances because Byzantium, Constantinople attracted a lot of wealth, and a lot of gold flowed through the Arab world and to the East. So actually, for a portion of time in Western Europe, the currency, or what became very important, was silver, because all of the gold had kind of come out of Western Europe and gone to Eastern Europe, or focused on that Constantinople area and the Arab world, and they weren't mining enough to make significant more quantities of it, so they were going to be stuck with silver for a little bit. It's still silver. However, there then became an increase in demand, and in the 14th and 15th century, gold mining increased, and there was also some more flow into Western Europe again from the Arab world. So we do see kind of this connection to the Arab world throughout the Middle Ages, and this is one surprising example that I didn't expect to see. But I guess I hadn't thought that there wasn't just people mining more gold all the time, but there was going to be a lot of recycling and a lot of moving and a lot of, repurposing what we already have to make other gold things. So that was probably the most interesting portion for me, was this material section, which I did not expect it to be as interesting. Also, throughout this book, there are absolutely beautiful, fascinating pieces to look at that have definitely retained their beauty from the Middle Ages, which was really, really interesting. Chapter 4 is Goldsmiths at Work. This references a lot of painting and archaeology and some texts which explain how the goldsmiths work. There's some really interesting prints. These are quite busy again, but lots of interesting things to see here. This is chapter 27. And on this page, what's most interesting to me and something else I hadn't thought about, which I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day, was the role of eyeglasses. I mean, for most people, for most of human history, if your eyesight went bad at a very young age, that was just how you were going to see the world for the rest of your life. And when you have a craft like goldsmithing, which might require high visual accuracy or needing good eyesight, the invention of the eyeglasses, which one of these pictures they're shown wearing eyeglasses. It's this one over here. That was a game changer. I'll just read the section here. Another new development shown in this engraving is that one of the goldsmiths is shown wearing glasses. Glasses were certainly worn in the 15th century, and the relationship of the development of lenses to goldsmiths' work remain an unexplored subject. Now, this book was written in the early 1990s, if I had to guess. 1992. So maybe there has been some exploration in the last 30 years, but that is something that I was just having a conversation with someone else about, how really the ability to have your eyesight corrected is not something that we've always had available to us. And thinking about how that would impact the goldsmith's work also appeared in this book, which was quite interesting to me. There are more beautiful pieces in this book. Really, the photography and the pictures, like these are, you could use these today. The craftsmanship on display in this book is fantastic. Chapter 5 is all about the products, and the products are going to take center stage. I mean, really, you can just look at the pictures at this point, although there is obviously the text as well to provide some interesting commentary. The quality and the detail on display is really, really quite amazing. Chapter 6. Oh, before we go on, this was my favorite piece. This is a crown. This was my favorite piece. Chapter 6 is the guild organization. So like many craftsmen in the Middle Ages, they were organized by guild, which was a very important part of life. And the organization also talked about two of the major saints that were associated with these guilds, Saint Dunstan and Saint Eligius. Personally, Saint Dunstan seems like a very, very interesting individual, an interesting saint with some interesting stories around him. So he was my favorite probably of the two, but the guild section was quite interesting in learning about the saints. But nothing from that section was too wildly different, in my opinion, from how guilds were set up for other crafts. I mean, there are slight differences, of course. However, I've read a lot of these medieval craftsmen section, and the guild section starts to feel very similar. But I guess it makes sense. You have a system that works for one people. You just maybe change a few things to work for whatever craft you're doing and reintroduce it. And so that section, while familiar, was good to read. Just another example of the beautiful craftsmanship. And chapter 7 was contracts and distribution, so how people got it. My favorite section, and I just want to read it, is something that's going to be familiar to anyone who has been given the runaround by a government entity. Because you will have good company with Thomas Frowick. For instance, Thomas Frowick in 1303 made a golden crown for Queen Margaret, the second queen of Edward I, and had considerable difficulty in getting his bill paid. The crown was commissioned by 3 of the king's servants, and when Thomas applied for payment, they referred him to the king's treasurer, we know where this is going, who told him to make out his bill and leave it with John de Cheam, the receiver of the bills. However, John failed to take any notice of it, so when Thomas petitioned the king, he was told that he might take his bill to the clerk of the king's exchange, who would then pay him in part before next Christmas. The perennial exasperation of the craftsman or businessman with bureaucracy comes out clearly in this account. Something that I think many of us have had to do once or twice in our life, and we can relate. So that section, again, just contracts, distribution, but that particular little anecdote stood out to me, so I wanted to share it because I felt like that was quite funny and relatable. And all the way back in 1300 hundreds. People are having to deal with bureaucracy and going here and there to get everything taken care of. So the next time you are running around the DMV, you can think about Thomas Frowick, or whatever government entity you are having to deal with where you live. You can think about Thomas Frowick going here and there in 1303 trying to get his bill paid. Overall, Goldsmith was really, really interesting. I really want to just get a book that showcases all the Goldsmith work that we still have today. That in and of itself would be interesting, and it was a good addition to the Medieval Craftsmen series that I have been reading and enjoying. If you have read this series, please let me know what you thought about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your